Welcome back to the Dawn of Liberty, right here on Real America's Voice.
Welcome back to the Dawn of Liberty. When considering the dawn of our nation, or any nation, one has to think about sacrifice. There are essentially no great nations that were not born from sweat, toil, tears, and great cost. When the colonists had had enough of British tyranny, they decided that freedom was worth the cost, which meant creating a military that could defeat the Brits. Someone who understands the valor and sacrifice of that early military is Congressman Dan Crenshaw, a Navy SEAL who became a member of the House of Representatives. Congressman, first of all, happy Independence Day to you.
Hey, happy Independence Day. Thanks for having me.
Congressman, I understand that from a very early age, you knew you wanted to be a part of the military's elite, which is, of course, the Navy SEALs. Tell me about when you had this realization and why you joined them.
Most SEALs you talk to have a similar story. We don't quite remember when we started that dream. I was maybe 11 or 12, but it started early. One of those childhood dreams because actually read Dick Marcinko's book, Rogue Warrior. There's a lot of books on SEALs now, but back then that was the one everyone knew. Of course, there was the really cool movie with Charlie Sheen, Navy SEALs. But really that book hooked up a lot of my generation. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL well before 9/11. And that's actually the thing that gets you through it because you've been wanting something for so long. That's how you get through a program like BUDS. Because you know you're going to go in there and say, look, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to die. There's no other choice.
Well, you had 5 deployments overseas, and in 2012 you were hit by an IED in Afghanistan, which is how you lost sight in your right eye and even your left eye until your vision was restored. How did this experience change you in terms of your perspective of what it means to be an American soldier fighting for this great nation?
Well, I got to look to the right a lot more. That's for sure. Death perception doesn't quite work, but people don't realize it really only matters about 3 feet in front of you. Those are jokes, but those aren't really jokes. How did it really change me is what your question is. Look, I know the cost of war better than anyone. And I know what is a good reason to send someone out in harm's way and what isn't. And, it's obviously a topic of conversation a lot these days. What are we getting ourselves into? How should we use America's might? Are we potentially getting into conflict? I at least have that perspective of how bad it can get. And I'm not even talking about myself. The perspective really is not from my injuries. It's from losing my friends. 8 or 9 of my good friends at least. And those funerals and staying in touch with those Gold Star families, that's the real sacrifice that we should be talking about. That's really what gives you true perspective.
That's true, because we see the external injuries, but we don't always see the internal injuries. And so, Congressman, in turning our focus to our nation's founding and that early army, I mentioned in the intro that great nations must be willing to sacrifice. How do you put into perspective the sacrifice of that first army and what it meant to the birth of the United States?
It's hard to put into words. They put it all on the line. The political environment wasn't exactly perfect for them. It wasn't like they had 90% of the population just ready to go. I mean, the nation was deeply divided on whether they should even fight the British. It kind of reminds you of the days before World War II, entering D-Day. Reminds you of now, right? We're deeply divided on whether we should take action. And they did it. They did it anyway. So the fact that you didn't have everyone behind you, you're going up against the greatest army and military in the world at that time. Yep. It's a little hard to put into words what kind of courage that truly takes. And I think when you talk about July, and of course that happened well before July 4th, Independence Day that we celebrate. And then I think what's significant about Independence Day is that's when the leaders of the country said, you know what, we have to sacrifice too. We have to put our names down. We have to put our names to this list, this Declaration of Independence, and put the targets right on our back. And the targets were on their back. I mean, they lost, just about all of them lost everything or were killed. And that was the political side finally getting behind the brave men who decided to join the Continental Army and start the fight with George Washington.
Yeah, Dan, I think about that group of relatively young men who got pissed off at King George and said, you know what, we're just going to declare our independence. And at that time, or at any time, the notion of overthrowing your government would seem to be a fool's errand. But then they wrote these grievances in a very eloquent way and said that the bonds of brotherhood have to be broken because of this usurpation of rights. If you could place yourself there in Philadelphia 250 years ago, what would you be saying to Jefferson and the others, do you think?
That's a really hard question. You know, it's crazy to think because if I were to place myself in that time, you realize I'd be like 8 years older than them, or maybe just 15
Right.
years older than some of them.
Right.
I mean, first of all, that's a crazy thought. And I mean, I don't know what I would say. That's a tough question. Good job. You guys are doing great. And I guess I would say, I would encourage them. I would love to encourage them and say, you are creating the greatest experiment that the world will ever know. And you can't possibly know that now, but you're doing it because what you're actually doing is you're writing down the greatest ideas and concepts and principles and philosophies that humanity had gathered over the course of 2,000 years. And you're putting it all in words right there in the Declaration of Independence. You know, I would give them encouragement.
You would be Team Revolution, not Team King George, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say.
Well,
Yeah.
and speaking of the founder's wisdom, in terms of leadership, I'm curious if you have a favorite founding father and the impression that he made on you.
Hard to say. It's easy to say George Washington, kind of war hero. So I would say George Washington. I want to give credit to a few, like Madison, architect of our Constitution, really made the fundamental arguments in the Federalist Papers. There's so many, but if you're gonna make me pick one, I hate to press the easy button, but it's obvious. It's George Washington for quite a few reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, next year will mark the 250th birthday of America and the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we are still such a young country, yet in that document, as you said, and in the 4,500 or so words of our Constitution, we have created a sublime form of self-government. Do you think, Congressman, we have, for the most part, upheld what the founders intended?
For the most part, you know, we're down on ourselves a lot in this country, and we lose perspective too often. We fought a civil war. We fought a civil war in order to uphold those principles that they laid down on paper. I think they'd be proud of that. There's a lot of history that would indicate that that was their intention, to set the stage for the future of a truly free country. We have our problems, and we like to complain about them. But I think we should have a little perspective and compare ourselves to the rest of the world, compare ourselves to history. And I think we should think that we're doing pretty good. It's still the best place to be. It's still pretty good to be an American. And especially when we get to our 250th birthday, I can't wait for that celebration. I think a little perspective should be in order.
Yeah, we are imperfect, warts and all, but I agree with you. I think that America is an exceptional place, one that's as aspirational as it is anything else. And on that note, what American values do you think are unique to us as Americans that we can lead by example?
I think America is built off of this idea of sacrifice and resilience, as you indicated. Other countries are also, it depends on who you're referring to, but you know, fundamentally, it's about self-governance and this idea that you own your own destiny. That's what it should be about anyway. Maybe that idea has fallen away, unfortunately, in recent years, but for the most part, still strong. I think your average American believes in a world that they can shape for themselves in a way that I don't think is true in many other places. I think that's really special.
It is. It is. The fact that you can create your own destiny, which goes back again to what the founders wanted as they created those sublime documents. Congressman, I got to ask you a question about Texas, because I know that in Texas, Texans take life, liberty, and happiness very seriously. Some say that these ideals might even be bigger in Texas. And there's this song called Uncle Sam in Mexico from the Rough and Ready songster that goes, "Young Texas came of age quite young, and then she married Uncle Sam. She sewed her star fast to his flag, and it shall shine there while there's a rag." Talk to me about Texas's unique place as its own laboratory of independence.
Where do you want me to begin? I mean, yeah, so I guess, yeah, we joined the Union, I think, in 1845, gained our independence from Mexico, and the Sam Houston's beating Santa Anna's army in, 1832. You know, it is the epitome of the story. Obviously, the Texians at the time drew a lot of courage and inspiration from the revolution itself, and decided to embody it and move forward with it in a very, very American way. That's why we love our Texas history. We're very proud of it. We say it's the, I'd certainly say it's the greatest nation in the country.
Well, Texas always seemed to me like they're just kind of that they take it so seriously in terms of their independence and their life, their liberty, their happiness. Perhaps I don't want to say more than other areas, but it sure seems like it sometimes if you meet a Texan, especially like yourself. Dan, finally, I know you became a father in 2023, and I became one last year. What do you want to instill? Thank you, and congrats to you as well. What do you want to instill in your daughter as she grows up at a time when people in this country are spitting on and burning our American flag?
You know, more than anything, resilience, mental toughness, integrity, honor, an understanding of moral certainty. Because it's not so much about, you got to understand why people are burning the flag. Because they're bitter. They believe in moral relativism. They lack perspective. They lack any appreciation for the things they have. A lot of these themes we've been talking about during this interview. You instill the right values in people, which are very, very basic, by the way. They're not going to end up burning a flag. And you know, I hope that I could keep adding to that list, as I'm sure you could for your new child. But I think those are some of the most important. You know, helping them understand that if they put the work in, they can shape their own destiny. Again, it's just what it means to be an American. I just think about what Reagan said about, you know, freedom being only one generation away from extinction. When our kids, when your daughter and my son grow up, the type of world they will be growing up in, we can only do what we can do as parents. But are you concerned for the next generation? We should always be concerned. That's why we fight and do what I do. It's not fun. But you got to keep the ship steering in the right direction. The thing I worry about is what we've seen over the last 20 years, the advent of social media, the internet. You know, it's created you would think it would create more informed and more educated conversations, but it hasn't. It's not, you know, it's more opportunity for slander, and there's a lack of critical thinking. I think we lose freedom when we lose critical thinking. And lose our ability to argue sensibly over issues that matter. And we should argue. That's the whole point of politics, is to argue and disagree. People shouldn't be so down on the fact that we're not unified. You're never going to be unified. You're supposed to have two different sides, basically, philosophies of how to run the country. That's okay. But the lack of critical thinking is what concerns me the most. Now, again, but I'm not a catastrophist like many are. I think if you force me to bet on a country, I would definitely bet on America right now, and especially now, I think we're doing pretty well. Yeah, America was always a laboratory of ideas, and it continues to be. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your reflections today, and thank you as well for your service to this great nation. Happy Independence Day to you, sir.
You're watching The Dawn of Liberty, only on Real America's Voice.